some hydrants to ensure reasonable spacing. The fire department not wanting to go over 500 feet between any. And I just want to also add that just so the board is aware that we have spoken to Sherry Wittes at the Conservation Commission, and they were essentially waiting for us to have a clean letter from the DPW. That was their only significant objection before being willing to issue an order of conditions from the commission. So I guess I would just summarize that the 19 lot layout with the roads is the same as was shown on the previous iteration of the plans. We made some cleanup changes to address the comments from DPW, addressed also some possible pipe conflicts, and I don't believe there's any remaining questions with the DPW, and I think there's no question in regard to the drainage system. And we still have just the 3 waivers outlined on the title sheet, which are in regard to, I don't have them right in front of me, I'm sorry, but the specifically was the more than 12 lots on a cul-de-sac, I think was the most significant one, which we had shown was we could have done this project in another way to not require that waiver, but it would end up altering much more area in the course of doing so. And this is actually a more elegant solution to the issue. I'll try and answer any questions that there are. But again, I think we have a clean comment letter from Lisa and from DPW. If there's any issues that Jason Fursky and the fire department still sees as out there, I hope we've addressed them. But if so, I'm sure he'll pipe up, and I'll try and answer any questions.
Yeah, James, could you address the progress on the Grafton side as well?
Sure. I believe we're at the last. We've got one last comment letter from the Conservation Commission and the planning there. And actually, in the big picture, Mr. Chairman, it's been the Grafton side that's kind of held this up because the Grafton Conservation Commission outside reviewer wanted all of the more than 200 wetland flags, maybe it's even more than 300 wetland flags on the Grafton side redone. And we eventually arrived at a negotiated settlement of how many of those would be redone, but it was essentially the wetlands on the Grafton side that unfortunately were kind of holding this up. And we are at the point now with Grafton, I believe might have been at a few weeks ago here in Westborough, which is of needing to respond to one last, hopefully, set of comments to be able to get approvals from both the Planning Board and Conservation Commission.
Okay, let's turn to the Jim Robbins. I would like to hear any comments you have first, and then we can turn to the board for questions.
There are several matters, and James touched on each one of them briefly. I think we definitely need to hear from Jason Fursky. I know Jason only got the updated plan this morning or this afternoon. I would like to make sure that he's okay with the revisions. Before we do that, also I had asked James Tatro if he would confirm with the Conservation Commission that they in fact did not want to own the land. They were happy with the Westborough Community Land Trust owning the land and Sudbury Valley maintaining it. Now, Sudbury Valley all along has expressed interest in maintaining this land because it abuts a piece of property that they also maintain, and that's the property that's at the end of Carroll Drive, part of Fay Acres. It's overseen and logged by the New England Forestry Division, but Sudbury Valley has trails all through it, and they maintain those trails. So this connects to that. They wanted to be involved in that. So I just wanted confirmation. The board could, if you choose to move forward and close the public hearing, you still have weeks before you're going to get a final written be worked out, as long as the board doesn't have a problem with it either being owned by the town or the land trust. Both the land trust and the town are amenable to Sudbury Valley maintaining the trails. That's number one, or rather that's number two. Next, we have the street names.
Okay, why don't we, Jason, do you have comments on this?
Good evening, everyone. I don't have any new or additional comments based on the plans that were submitted today. The only thing I wanted to make sure that the 4/23/2019 FTA 1 and FTA 2 plans were included. They were missed on the original plan review of submission. They were submitted, I believe, back in February.
That's fine. So no other comments from the fire department?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Mark.
Why don't we go to the board for questions on this? Jim, Paul, do you want to start?
No further questions, Mark. We've been through all this pretty well.
Okay. Hazel?
A couple of things. One, I want to make sure that we're clear with the project as to how the construction traffic is going to be routed over local roads.
Okay.
And will that be, Jim, will that be part of the decision?
Yeah, so thank you, Hazel. I'm glad you brought that up. A typical portion of my decision boilerplate requires that no truck traffic travel through residential streets. So for example, if you were concerned about material coming to the site, once the roads are built, they have to get into the site. We all understand that. So they're going to have to come over Harvest Way to build the portion of the road that comes off of Harvest Way. But once the new road is built, Melrose Lane or whatever its name is in the future, they would stage the construction internal to the site. So every day there wouldn't be equipment coming to the site. Obviously the workers would need to come to the site. They might come Harvest Way or they might come through Grafton depending on where they're working. But my major concern would be that there's no traffic coming through Westborough that's going to the Grafton portion of the site and vice versa. We don't want anything coming into Westborough from the Grafton site. So also we wouldn't allow any truck traffic or any workers' vehicles to be parked on Harvest Way. We wouldn't allow them to conflict with school bus traffic on Harvest Way. The hours of operation would be limited to our typical hours to protect the surrounding residential neighborhood and the established neighborhood at the ridings. I want to make sure that that's what you envisioned.
Have you had any discussions with the planner in Grafton to make sure that truck traffic, which is accessing the Grafton part of the project, are not using Westborough roads?
Well, that's what I just said. I said that earlier, that we would not allow any traffic that's accessing Grafton to come through Westborough. And you're right, it would include all the Westborough roads. So at West Main to Adam Street to Harvest Way to the subdivision.
Okay.
And hauling routes would also be defined by the board. It'll be noted in the minutes from this evening.
We had a calculation done early in the process of what the rough material balance would be, and essentially what is going on this property is that the top half of Melrose Drive is the top third, I guess I should say, is a mild fill. The rest of it is varying degrees of cut, and that surplus of material, there's a surplus of material on the Westborough side, goes to the Grafton side to an area, starts about station 6+0, which is just on the Westborough side of the one wetland crossing on the Grafton side. And the Grafton side needs a large amount of material, and essentially the same amount as is going to be created in surplus on the Westborough side. So we do not anticipate hauling of material that's just ordinary borrow surplus being brought to or from the property. There will be some trucks naturally carrying stone and perhaps sand, other materials that are not simply derived from this hill, but the movement of materials, earthwork, just to do the general grading will be from the Westborough side of the property to the Grafton side. And as the town planner said, in one of the earlier meetings with the previous planner in Grafton, the topic of basically neither town wanting to have the vehicles dealing with construction on their side coming through from the other town was plain from both parties.
So, James, where is Casa Builder's office?
Boy.
Do you know if we use any Westborough contractors?
I do not know. The address that we've been sending correspondence to a lot of times now is 1 Golden Court in Westborough.
I guess we just need to be careful how we word that restriction, because we would obviously, it seems like we wouldn't want a Westborough contractor to not get a bid because they couldn't use Westborough roads to get there.
Well, it's, Mr. Chairman, as long as they're not hauling materials,
okay, so we're only restricting hauling materials. I guess I'm asking Jim Robbins to be careful in the wording of that, and once we see the wording of that, we can discuss it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually writing it now with this in mind. So, for example, let's just brainstorm that for a second. If there's a contractor in Westborough, it could be Mr. Benacasa himself, who has materials, say, elsewhere in Westborough, like maybe on Quick Farm down by the old Apple storage building, that he intends to bring to the site, it would have to start in Westborough to get to Grafton. So I think we would need to talk, James, with Mr. Benacasa to make sure that if he plans to bring any material from his own property elsewhere in town, that he let us know so that we know is he going to haul over Nash Street? Is he going to haul over Adams Street to Harvest Way? I would want to know what that is. But if truly the balance of cuts and fills are as shown on the plan, he shouldn't need to bring any material through Westborough. It would come from Westborough into Grafton, interior to the subdivision. So it shouldn't leave the site. Is that correct, James?
I believe that's correct, Jim. Again, we had a calculation done by CMS, who came out with, to our great delight, that we were going to have to figure out some very different grading, that the surplus from Westborough is needed in Grafton in that amount. If there's any other material being brought to the site from somewhere else, then you're going to create a surplus. And frankly, the lots in Grafton are also, it's also an open space subdivision with smaller lots with open space, and they can't absorb a lot of material. There's just not space for it on the Grafton side either. So I don't anticipate that situation coming about. You would be correct to say it's impossible to absolutely rule it out, but I don't anticipate it.
Jim, the other thing I was concerned about are things like concrete mixers. I'm just not talking about hauling materials. They're also construction vehicles, like, as I said, like concrete mixers, and various things.
So I'll work on some language that limits all construction traffic. If they're coming to pour a foundation on one of the 19 lots in Westborough, and they're coming, say, from the tough side of Grafton on Route 30, then it would make sense for them to come Route 30 to West Main to Adams to Harvest Way. if they're coming to Westborough. If they're
Yes,
going to
but-
Grafton,
Yeah, it makes sense to them, but if they're looking at the route, that's not the way they're gonna go. So that's, I just want to make sure that that is the way they end up going and not across Jasper Street.
yes, and so we will make sure in the decision that we name the routes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
We went through this before with a construction project in Grafton,
Right.
coming over our streets. I understand.
Hazel, do you have any other questions?
No, just on the street naming, let me just quickly ask James, why was Melrose Drive picked as a name?
That was the choice of the applicant, and after actually trying a couple names in, we had easy access to the Grafton Police Department, who does a, gosh, it seemed like 5-minute review and response in regard to the acceptability of names. We tried a couple, and which were too similar to something else in town, and then they suggested Melrose, and the Grafton Police said that that works fine.
All right,
One
but
thing I want to add in regard to that name is that name is carrying all the way through to Adams Road in Grafton. That is one road, and we wanted to use the same name, have the same name in both towns. And if you look at the plan on the screen, if you look close, it's a little hard to see. I apologize, but just over the town line, you can see on the Grafton side, you see lot MD 25. That lot would be 25 Melrose Drive. It would be in Grafton. Over on the Westborough side, the nearest lot to it, you see MD 27. That would be 27 Melrose Drive, but in Westborough. And those numbers were arrived at. The applicant had discussions with the assessors in both towns as to how the numbering would come out. And now the numbering doesn't affect the name, but one of the changes on the last sets of these plans was, instead of the lots being lots numbers 1 through 19, you see these numbers on the screen: MD 30, MD 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 40, etc. on one side of the road, and you see the odd numbers 27, 29, 31, 33, etc. on the other side of the road. This is just an attempt to have no confusion between future street numbers and lot numbers in the numbering of these things. But Hazel, you're right, that's not the name, and the name, as shown on the plans, is just something that was amenable to the applicant and amenable to the Grafton Police Department.
yeah, I mean, obviously my concern is that we try to name new streets in Westborough to have some sort of historical significance. And so consequently, you know, it would have been nice if we'd been able to combine with Grafton and come up with something that covered this, because it's a historical area of both towns. But, you know, and I know you were supposed to come before the Historical Commission to discuss this, but, you know, if there's a requirement between both assessors to have the same name, I guess that's what I'm getting at. Are the assessors from both of the towns feel strongly that it should be a one name street running all the way down? That's what I don't know.
Hazel, I think that was their preference. We talked about multiple options here in the course of things. I know at one point there was a discussion of making all the Westborough lots be on still Harvest Way. And I think the chairman had a bit of an objection to that layout of having a road make a 90-degree turn but still be the same name. And I probably the best way to characterize it is that it was the assessor's preference. I don't know if you'd say it's how strong a determination they are to have it be the same name, but it was their preference.
So, James, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you're saying that Melrose was a suggestion, but it's not set in stone? Or
I think that's fair, yes.
so can we present, or can we, you know, Hazel, do you think the historical commission can come up with a couple of options for names that might, they can present to Grafton and go through that same review with their police department and come up with something that does have historic significance? I do
Yeah, I
think,
mean, I would prefer that from a historical viewpoint. I mean, I can ask one of my members to do a little research on, what the historical names might be possible for that particular piece of property. I've got a meeting tomorrow night and see whether, someone can come up with some ideas which we could then pass across. And I'm fine. I mean, I don't think the planning board needs to discuss. I don't want to take up any more time with the planning board, but I just was kind of trying to work this out in my own mind, how this is to be done. I mean, I personally think it would be quite confusing to have, live at 19 Melrose Drive in Westborough, but then there's a different Melrose Drive in Grafton. And I am surprised that the assessors did not want those roads split for names just for ease of people that are living there.
well, there's not going to be 219 Melrose Drives.
No, but the same thing, it still is confusing if you've got the same name and a similar number on one street. So that's why, as I said, I would have thought that the assessors would have been happier to have a separate name for the Westborough versus the one in Grafton. So as I said, I was just surprised to hear it was going to roll away. But I will follow up with the historical commission, see whether we can come up with a couple of names, if that's all right with you, James.
That's fine, but no objection.
Okay. Hazel, anything else?
No.
Okay, get to you on Jim Ball.
Yes, I'm all set, Mark.
Did you have a question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear your answer, Jim.
No further questions, Mark.
Okay, Bill Spencer.
No further questions.
I don't have any further questions at this time. Kristen, do we have any public comments either by email or anyone on this call? Kristen, you're muted. I don't know if you, Jim Robbins, do you?
So
you
we
get that
received
email as well?
comments from the engineering department yesterday, noting that they have come to agreement with James and the project applicant on the items in their letter. Some of the items in my conversation with the town engineer will be worked out. They're small, not worth holding up the public hearing, because as you know, changes are made to these plans and then reviewed again by the Department of Public Works before I present them to the planning board for endorsement. And as you know, you have to sign every page. Every page gets reviewed by the town engineer prior. So
Jim, I think we talked about that already, as far as the engineer's comments I'm just wondering if there's any public comments because it's a public hearing.
I just checked the email and we don't have anything at this time.
Okay. Sorry, Jim. I think I cut you off a little bit. So
that's all right. I did have one additional comment. Mr. Chairman, the matter of the street names, there is still time for the Historic Commission to reach out to Grafton and get the names resolved. If you are willing and the board is willing to simply transfer that item to their responsibility, because after all, it's their responsibility anyway, and just close the public hearing subject to the two historic commissions agreeing on the names, and that the names are then put on the streets prior to endorsement of the plans. Because I don't think anyone is up in arms about the names that are chosen here. It's just a matter of whether or not it's appropriate to have the same name going into two towns. They can work that out.
All right. So I think that can be something worked out and made a condition of your when you write the approval. So I think we can move past the issue of the street names. I do actually think that the street name should be the same in Grafton and Westborough. I think it seems to me like a direct shot into the end of the cul-de-sac, and as long as the numbers are different, I don't think there'll be confusion. It will be, somebody turning off of Adams Road in Grafton onto Melrose Drive or whatever it's called. We'll start at number 1 and go all the way down to the end to number 30, whatever it is. I'm not even sure. I think it would be more confusing if the street just suddenly changed names in the middle.
Mark, I would agree with that.
So I actually like the way it's numbered, but I agree that an historical name commission could even consult with the Grafton Historical Commission if such a body exists, which I'm assuming it does, and maybe come up with something that's meaningful to both towns, given, I'm guessing that there's probably something that would, have some significance in both towns. But I'm not the best person to consult on that. Jim or Hazel is probably better served with that. So I think we should move past that. Is there any other issues we haven't discussed, Jim? Jim Robbins, I can't hear you.
No,
Anything?
there's, I had trouble unmuting there. No, I have no further issues. I just want to let the board know, and for the applicant's purposes, that the historic commissions may take some time settling these names. I would ask that the applicant give the board grace to finish the decision in the month of June sometime, without a date set for that, because we need to hear back from Open Space on the ownership, and we need to hear from the Historic Commission.
Mr. Chairman, we will give an extension as necessary for that.
James, I did have one question. Did Grafton require any affordable housing units?
I don't believe that is part of the process, but I could be mistaken. I don't believe that has been discussed.
So it's my understanding that your application was submitted prior to our zoning change that requires affordable housing units in this project. And I'm a little disappointed that we continued this for so long without addressing that and somehow asking the applicant to provide some affordable housing in this subdivision. And I'm just wondering how the rest of the board feels about that. Anybody care to weigh in? Because I found it a little bit disappointing, I guess.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is that this project has been in the works for a long time, and it was a long time prior to the change that we made. So, excuse me. So I'm disappointed. I think at the same time, it would be unfair of us to suddenly try to put that restriction or that requirement on this particular development. I think it's clear to everyone that anything going forward is going to be subject to this change. But I think in this particular development, it has not been entirely the fault of the developer that this has gone on for so long. And I think since it would be unfair to kind of change the ground rules at this particular time.
I would agree with Hazel, Mark. Same disappointment, obviously. I wish we could go back and do it, but I think a lot of this had to do with Grafton and changes happening there. So I would agree. While disappointed, I think it would be challenging to impose that at this time.
All right, Bill, any comments on that?
Yeah, I agree with the other board members. We've been working with this for an awful long time before we started getting a little bit more aggressive with our affordable community. So yeah, it's hard to hold the builder responsible for this at this point. Other than that, in terms of the project and street naming and so forth, no other issues. We'll just hear back as we move forward on it. Looking forward to seeing it get done.
All right. I agree with everyone's sentiment on that, and I may be, I guess, asking a lot of the developer. But James, would you ask him if he would consider voluntarily providing an affordable unit?
I will put that question.
But see what he says. Even
I will put that question to him.
Yeah, even one of the 14 would be helpful in protecting our affordable housing percentage.
Just as a point of information, if you are waiting for that answer, you have to keep the public hearing open.
All right. Well, and I don't think we can wait for that answer because this has been going on a long time. Although we do have some other unresolved issues. I think we can move past that one because I think I know the answer to that one. But, James, any thoughts on that as to how he'll react?
Very few developers are anxious to have to sell for less. Right. That's the simplest answer, though. It is, if you actually see what qualifies as the income for, quote, affordable, it is much more than people typically think it is.
All right, I think we should move past that. I know this has been going on a long time. So let's go back to Jim Robbins, and I think you said that we've covered everything. We don't have any public comments. So are we ready for a motion then?
I sent you a draft motion for closing the public hearing. Please, however, based on our discussions tonight, note that the street names will be worked out by the Historic Commission and that the open space ownership will be determined prior to the decision being written.
Okay, and also hauling routes.
Well, that'll be in the decision.
That'll be in the decision. Right. Okay. All right, Jim Ball, I think you were ready to make that motion, or?
I can do that, Mark. I move that the planning board close the public hearing for the definitive subdivision plan for the Ridings 2.
Okay, do we need to comment on those two issues, Jim Robbins, in the motion, or?
I would just suggest that, Jim, that you say that the issues of ownership for open space and street names will be worked out prior to the decision.
I'd like to add to my motion that the street names will be worked out and the ownership of the open space in addition will be worked out prior to final issue of decision.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll second that motion. Any discussion? If so, unmute yourself and speak up. Okay, I'll do a roll call again. Bill?
Good to go. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, Hazel?
Approve.
Jim Ball?
Yes, Mark.
Okay. And I also vote yes. So the hearing is closed and we can move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, James. Thank you, Jason. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On the call, but thank you for everything you and the fire department has done for the town. The next agenda item is project progress and possible lot releases for Village Commons at 1 Gleason Street. Farouk, you've been waiting patiently. If you could unmute yourself, and I'll let you address the board first and let us know what it is you're asking for. And then we can turn to Jim Robbins and the building commissioner and the board. Farouk, you have to unmute yourself. Farouk, you have to unmute yourself. Is it?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm so
Please.
sorry, I forgot to unmute that, so I was on the mute. Thank you all for inviting me over to, discuss this matter today. I am in front of the board to ask for the release of the remaining lots. There are 7 residential lots and 2 commercial lots that need to be released, along with the garage barns, which are not considered as separate lots, but they're there. So I want the whole kit and caboodle released so we can go ahead and complete the project. Last time we had a conversation with you in the last meeting, you had asked me to do a couple of things before you would consider releasing the lots. One of them was to make sure that we now have a contract with the marketing of the affordable units. So we not only identified the affordable units, but we also have a contract in place with MCO, which is an agency that does all the marketing for the affordable units around here. And I already started one of the affordable units. We're going to start framing that tomorrow. It was from the previous bunch of lot releases that we have received. And I got 2 more that will be done from these lots that are going to get hopefully released tonight. That's why I've completed that one thing that the board asked me for last time. The board had also asked me to resolve, or at least work things out with the design review board, as they had some concerns and comments, which I've already done, and I have sent all the information over to Jim Robbins for the DRB. Nothing to do with you, but for the DRB. The other thing that you had asked me from a planning board standpoint was to make sure that that traffic light, the pedestrian light was up and running, which it is. Other than that, I think I'm pretty good to go. So we just want to get the building permits and start banging those out. So.
Okay. So I'm going to turn to Jim Robbins first for comments and his updates on the progress since the last meeting.
Yes, and so Farouk, I'm still waiting to hear back from the DPW about the street painting, the lines. You were supposed to paint some symbols on the street adjacent to the crosswalk. I've not heard back on that yet. Also, administratively, you didn't submit any lot release forms. You didn't submit the lot release fees. I have to arrange for a notary public to witness the meeting. Without those forms, I can't do that. There's nothing to notarize. Number 2, you mentioned the design review board, and you did submit plans to the design review board, but we gave you, or the design review board gave you permission to amend 1 lot and to return to discuss the other issues. So you did get permission for occupancy on 1 of the units based on changes that you made to the plans. The other changes have not been worked out. And until those matters are worked out, you're not in compliance with the special permit. That's required. Also, the commercial building requires design review board approval. We have a design review board meeting Thursday morning where we will begin discussing those matters. But until all of your issues with design review, and that includes the other type C units too that have had some changes to them that were not approved by the design review board. So until that all is worked out, you're not in compliance with what the planning board requires. Then there's the matter of the building permits that you have submitted for the summer house, which is a clubhouse. I think you need to talk to the planning board about the elements that you plan to place in the clubhouse. It's not intended to be just a storage space, an open room. It's intended to be a real clubhouse. Also, the commercial building. I know you don't have a tenant for it, but that will affect your design. And I know you were looking for a daycare possibility, which I think is a great use. I think they would probably have a very good business given that there's 275 units at Westborough Village and 120 at Westborough Station and 15 at your development. I think a daycare would be great. However, daycare facilities have different requirements under the building code, and they would probably affect the number of doors and the access points to the building. So that would also trigger design review. So you have a lot of things that I think you need to work out. If the board wants to discuss those things, that's fine. And I think you probably have, we have some other boards here, some other departments here that may also wish to comment.
Through the chairman, may I
Go ahead. Yep.
Okay, Jim, I had already submitted you a new plan of that patio that was requested. You already should have it in your file. That was done last week. I never heard back from you after I sent you that plan. Number two, I already submitted you a plan of the commercial building a week ago along the same lines, but I didn't hear back from you. So for your design board review. And I also, as a matter of fact, I just wanted to bring to your attention, you were talking about the signage. Here is the signage. It got done. So I just did not want, I completed everything. I really want to get these released tonight. That nothing else will happen in another week or so, but I got to get the permits in, takes time, and get the building started. So I have completed everything. I sent you an email delineating all the items that are outstanding that I have submitted to you, but I did not hear back. So I'm basically just waiting.
So, Farouk, you did hear back from me. As a matter of fact, I actually have the email to show this evening. You did hear back from me. I told you what you needed for this meeting. And I told you that your landscape plan was not acceptable. I told you that in an email. It was very sparse.
But
You have to have design review approval.
Farouk, please hold off a second, okay? I'd like to hear from Fred and Hazel as well. I want to give you a chance to respond to these, but I don't want it to turn into a back and forth, you know, he said, she said kind of thing. It's non-productive. So, Fred, do you have any comments on the progress and the unresolved issues? Anything to add to what Jim Robbins just gave us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think so, but let me just put out what I think I need or have to hear from the board. First, Mr. Ansari has identified units 610, not units, I'm sorry, street addresses 610 and 13 Donia Drive. I think those are okay, but I just wanted to verify that with Mr. Robbins, the affordables. Part of the affordables too, I had asked for a phasing schedule. I'm not sure that I 100% understand the phasing schedule. I know he's in the midst of building 6, but I'm not hearing when 10 and 13 would be completed. I don't want to get into the Zara Drive thing again. So I'd like to see if the board can get a solid phasing schedule on the affordables. He's also, Mr. Ansari is also asking for the commercial building to now only be a shell only. So just so I'm clear, is that the commercial space is supposed to be, my understanding, completed by the 7th certificate of occupancy. But if we're issuing a shell only, I don't know where that puts this in this whole scheme of things. So I just want to make sure the board would be okay with a shell only permit for the first, I think it's 2,400 or 3,000 square feet, whatever the square footage is. So that's another question I have. The last thing I understood on the clubhouse / summer house was that it was just going to be basically a box, no bathroom facilities, no heat. So I'm not sure, again, if the board's okay with all that. And then the BR design review board, all their issues, but I think there's a meeting coming up. So I'm not sure that they've resolved all those items as well. So those are kind of my items.
Okay. Farouk, I'll give you a chance to respond to those in a second, but I just want to hear from Hazel as the design review representative, just to hear an update on the design review board's position. Go ahead, Hazel.
All right. I'd just like to make clear that we asked for certain things which we had not received. There were changes made which we did not approve. And the fact that Mr. Ansari delivered some plans to Jim didn't mean the design review board had met or had any discussion about them. We are meeting on Thursday, and at that time we'll begin to discuss all the changes that have been made and talk about the commercial building. And then there'll be a report back to the planning board. So until that's done, I feel any release on the lots would be premature.
Farouk, why don't we give you a chance to respond to this, to those issues that Fred and Hazel and Jim brought up?
Sure. I have submitted a revised landscaping plan. I had first submitted a landscaping plan, and Jim responded that that was not what he was expecting to get. So we submit a revised plan, which is exactly in accordance with what the design review board had wanted. So they already have that now. Obviously, they had not had a meeting, so they probably didn't look at it. But I have already submitted it last week. I worked on it several days to get that done in time, so we get it out of the way. And number two, same thing with a commercial building. Yes, usually when the commercial buildings are built, they usually just built out a shell and you just find a tenant. Once a tenant is there, then they put out whatever they want. Now, it's very highly likely if I do decide to go with the daycare center, we will have that completed in no time, but you need a few extra things to put it in there. But at least I would have had the intent of getting that building up to get the foundation in. There's no point in delaying that process. Number three, the phasing is what Fred just brought up. I already got one that is in the process of being built. So that would basically be within the first 7 units, I would have had that built and sold. And then after the last 7 units or 8 units, the other 2 will be phased in. I don't even have the lot releases for those units. So forget about building them. And that's why, I think design review board, I thought was a separate entity that I would have to work with all the details of it. Now, there was some concern about the siding issues. I sent Jim every possible picture and approval that design board approved to us 4 years ago or 3 years ago. And that siding is in 100% compliance with that. There's no issues at all. Yes, there are some issues with a couple of windows. Bill Hazlitt came, Hazel had requested him, so he came out to the job site and we met with him. And I wrote an email to Fred, to Bill, everybody, what Bill thought. He didn't think it was his call, but the DRB's call. Other than that, I have no other issues. The one more thing that I wanted to bring it to planning board's attention today is at the time when you guys approved the plan, there was no mailboxes shown on the premises, and people are going to be living there. So I really need to get the mailboxes in. So I did send a plan to Kristen. It was late. I sent it to her yesterday, showing where the mailbox ought to go. I just want to make sure that you guys are on board with it, so I can get that installed. It's a very good location, and I think Kristen, you got that plan, right? So I sent it to Jim also. So Jim has that.
So
If I could.
Jim, go ahead, respond to that, please.
Yeah. So Farouk, let's just be clear about submitting plans. Submitting plans is not the same thing as approval. Your special permit requires design review board approval, not
Right.
just submitting plans to me. So currently you're not in conformance with the special permit. You're not. So I don't know why you would think you get additional lot releases. You have to come into conformance with the special permit. When you changed the design of Unit C, the Unit C type, you took out doors and you submitted the building permits with a bulkhead that was not on the approval. So you needed to come back to the design review board. The design review board gave you approval on 1 unit so you could get an occupancy. They didn't give you approval for all the other Unit Cs. That's in the minutes, and you acknowledged that at the last design review board meeting. You needed to come back to talk about the other Unit Cs, whether or not you're going to put in the door with the bulkhead. That has not been resolved. So you've done it again in yet a second building. You're going to need to talk about that with the design review board. As of right now, you're not in compliance with the special permit. And as far as the mailboxes are concerned, that's probably a good matter also for the design review board to report to the planning board.
Farouk,
Your
Farouk,
submission
can I
was
ask you,
Thursday.
Farouk, can I ask you, you haven't commented on the clubhouse yet, and that's been brought up twice. Can I hear your comments on
Yes.
this?
On the clubhouse, it's designed exactly the way that the designers had intended it and the DRB approved it. When the DRB approved it, there is no talk about any bathrooms in it. There's no heating. It's all open. It's a very small area, really is. I basically copied that. I didn't change anything, in that clubhouse or the summer house, they call it. And that's based on the design that was approved by the DRB. So I even had a code review done on it. And based on the code review, they had said that for the summer house type usage, you don't require any of that stuff. But if the planning board mandates yeah, here you go. This is what was approved and this is what I did. If you show those are the 4 car barns, car garages, and then that's the yeah, it is shown right here. If you want to show the front elevation of it, please. Move it down a little bit. Yeah, so show the front elevation of it. Chris, yeah, no, move it like, no, the other way. More. Yeah, right here. You see that? That is identical to what was approved by the design review board. I have pictures of it. So that's what it is shown. And if you want a few changes to it, I don't have a problem in doing that. But to hold me up for something like this, in making progress, I don't get it. I mean, so I submitted everything, you know, even please show the commercial building. Do you have a copy of it? I think I sent that to you. That commercial building has been submitted. It's not approved, I understand that. But once it's approved, then we can go ahead with that. So, and phasing, I've already answered that. One I'm ready to give away right now, and the other 2 in the next 8 units. They'll be given away.
Okay, Farouk, I'd like to turn to the rest of the board for comments and questions. Jim, I saw your hand raised first, so why don't Jim Ball, go ahead.
Yeah, move it up, please. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Mark. On the phasing issue, one thing I want to be sure is the last unit done isn't affordable again, because what I don't want to end up is with Zara where it hasn't been completed, the affordable unit. So can we, I appreciate, Fruit, that that you've done one in the first 7, which I think is great. I'd want to be certain that the very last unit isn't one of the 2 remaining affordables, if that's possible.
That's perfectly okay by me.
Even if it's the second to last, I just don't want it to be the last one out and not get done.
I agree to it, 100%.
Okay. And then I'm concerned, I think, to Jim's comments, Farouk, at the end of the day, I'm delighted that you put these plans and such in, but I think to Hazel's comment, at the end of the day, they have not yet been approved. You did make changes from design review and they haven't been approved. That meeting is pending. I feel like for us to free up lots without you essentially being, in line with the permit is difficult. So I feel like you're making great progress, and I think that you've put in the things and we've submitted, but they have not yet. We have not yet heard back from design review that indeed they're in agreement and with your changes and it's in accordance. So that concerns me.
Okay, Chairman, can I answer him?
Sure.
Okay, I am only asking for the lot releases. I'm not building those yet. So I cannot build a commercial building till the design review board approves it. I mean, I know that. I submitted it, I did my part, and in 2 days there is a meeting. Now they may or may not approve it for another 2 weeks, that I don't know. I may have to work back and forth. So I didn't hold anything back from them. Everything has been put into the pipeline. Now, Jim also said that I did not give him the lot release forms. Yes, I did. I sent that to you 10 days ago. The lot release forms along with all the lot numbers mentioned. I even said, can I bring a check to the meeting for $800? And I did everything. So you have it in your email. It's there. So.
Okay. Sorry, Farouk. I didn't mean to interrupt. Mark. Well, so one more question: can we offer releases pending approval from design review? So if after that meeting there's agreement, then the releases are acceptable, or do we need to wait for our follow-up meeting where that's been done for discussion? I'm just bringing that up. I'm curious, Jim and Mark, your thoughts on that.
Jim, go ahead. Jim Robbins, can you answer that question from a procedural standpoint?
As I understand it, Jim Ball has asked if we can do the lot releases at the next meeting.
No, Jim, I was asking if we can release them pending design review approval at their Thursday meeting. Or is that too iffy in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I don't have I don't know what Mr. Ansari is talking about. I have an email to show you today dated May 4th, where I asked for all those things. I do not have those things. You have to have a notary to notarize your signatures. The Attorney General's new procedure allows the notary to witness the meeting and then notarize the signature, as long as the notary sees that each member of the board votes to release the lots. But I don't recommend you do that without the proper forms and without the notary present.
I would, Mark, I'd also,
Hazel, I just want to make sure Jim Ball is done, and then I'll let you go. Okay, Jim, did you have anything else?
No, Mark, and I did see that email from Jim that showed indeed that those forms had not been submitted, so that concerns me. I had no further questions.
Okay. Hazel, why don't you go ahead? Farouk, give it a minute.
Okay. I have no way of showing you the email where I scanned and faxed him, sent him those forms for the lot releases. Okay, that was done a long time ago, and I even asked in my email that I'm coming, hoping to get the lot releases in this meeting. I mean, if you didn't arrange for a notary, I don't know what to tell you, but I wrote that very clearly in my email, and that this is what I was coming for, and I give it. I'll tell you the date. This was the date of my email to him, which was 5/11/20. You know, 5/11/20, and this was the email that I had written right here with all the details.
Could you stop, please?
Yeah.
Stop, please.
Thank
you. Okay, stop talking.
I couldn't hear you, sir. Sorry.
Okay, stop talking. Hazel, did you have any comments or questions?
I would just say very firmly that under no circumstances should we do any releases at this time. The back and forth of the design review has not been completed. He may have given us plans, which he's presented to Jim. We have not seen them. There may be further changes. There have been changes consistently on these properties without any design review approval. And so under no circumstances would I vote to have any releases done at this time.
Bill, Spencer, do you have any comments?
Yeah, sorry about the delay. I'm just messing with my mouse here, trying to get the mute on. So if you can hear me, no, I sympathize with all the comments that have been made and understand the push towards this. But other than the design review board, which I think is a very large issue, I want to ask Jim real quickly if he can remind me. I was going through my notes on this project since it's been in front of the board, and I was looking for things. What was on the commercial space for a lot release, what was the minimal expectation for that? Was it just a shell, or was it substantial building, or what was there? Do you remember, Jim? And if you don't, I'll dig a little bit deeper.
It's 3,000 square feet,
Yep.
and it doesn't specify the extent to which the building is built out. I think that's a discussion that the planning board needs to have. That actually is a segue to a comment that I'd like to bring to the attention of the planning board. So through the chairman, this is about the zoning.
Go ahead.
This is a mixed use development. This is not just a residential subdivision. The project next door, which is Westborough Village, was supposed to originally have a 3-story building with commercial on the first floor and residential above. Then it was supposed to have, in addition, another freestanding commercial building. And as you know, there has not been 1 square foot of commercial built in that development. It is 276 units of residential only. This development was supposed to right that wrong. When we approved it, the board was intent upon having commercial use here. They gave the developer then, which was Mr. Zaretti, the advantage of having 3,000 square feet built after the 7th occupancy, and then the additional 2,400 square feet to be built after 5 more occupancies, and then the balance of the commercial up to 9,000 square feet could be built out. I don't think you're going to get 1 square foot of commercial other than a shell unless you tell the developer that there will be commercial in this development. Mr. Ansari is not a commercial builder. He needs to have some reason to provide you a commercial component. The same thing goes for the summer house, which is intended to be a clubhouse. You need to have basic facilities in this shell. The design review board does not approve interior build out. That is a decision that's made between the developer and the planning board. If this is going to be a clubhouse and I'm there for a function, where do I go to the bathroom? If I'm a guest, whose house do I use for the bathroom? To not provide a bathroom, heating, air conditioning, it's not a clubhouse, it's just a storage space. This project can't be just the delivery of residential units. It's intended to be a village. If those components are not provided, it's not consistent with the spirit of the zoning bylaw.
Bill, Spencer, I think we were in the middle of your comments. Do you have any other thoughts you wanted to finish?
No, I think those are the two main ones that I had on there. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Good. So I have some thoughts, and then Farouk, I'll let you respond, and then we can continue the discussion as needed. So I'm under the impression that you understand that there's a process that has to be followed, both for the sake of the planning department, the building commissioner, every town official involved, as well as the future occupants of this project. And one of the processes is to submit lot release forms that we don't have, to go through the design review process, which you went through and changed things without their permission. And now you're asking us to approve lot releases before you even finish that process, including the commercial building, which is part of that process. The intent of the clubhouse was a clubhouse for use year-round by occupants as a community space. The units are smaller, and the idea that was presented to us at the time was that they would all have use of this space on a year-round basis to make up for the size of the units. And I think the expectation presented to the board was that that would have plumbing, heating, a bathroom, not just be a gazebo, an enclosed gazebo, or whatever, storage or whatever you want to call it. You know, I think Jim Ball made a good point. I think you made efforts since our last meeting. In the past 2 weeks, you endeavored to comply with everything we asked for. But I go back to my comments of the last meeting. This project has been ongoing for 3 years. There was ample time to get through the design review process, to get through all of these issues. Now you're asking us to rush this process for you, and I'm simply not ready to do that because there's just too many unresolved issues. And I think you need to follow the process. And to be honest with you, I don't think we have anything to vote on. It was made clear that lot release forms are due the Thursday prior to a meeting. That was last week. We don't even have them yet. And I know you're shaking your head or whatever, but I have utmost confidence in our planning department to keep track of lot release forms. So I don't think you filled them out. We don't even have a notary here to notarize them. And, so I don't think we even have anything to vote on, to be honest with you. All right, so I'll give you a few minutes to respond and make your case.
Okay, I'll go with the summer house first. I followed the approved design plan to make a plan for submittal. I did not concoct anything in it. I did not know that that should have a bathroom in it. I have absolutely no problem putting a bathroom in it if that's what the planning board requires, or the heat, or the AC. It's a very small room, That's what they approved. It's a very small room. So, and just be aware of it. And that's all taken from the design board review approved plans. I didn't make them up. I just had my architect draw that up into a plan because those were just the renderings. So I did that. I can add the bathroom. I can add the heat and AC if that's what's required, but still is a very small room. Number two is the commercial building. That I'm going through the process. I've submitted for a design board review commenting, and once they comment and I respond, we're back and forth. Once it's all approved, it will be built in accordance with that. So, and as far as those forms are concerned, I scanned those forms and I don't know what to tell you. Maybe this got lost in the mail. That was sent a long time ago, but I don't know. I can resend in like 1 second. They're already on my scanner. So those were there. And I said to Jim in my email that I'll be coming looking for the lot releases. So I didn't realize that he never got that. I did not hear back from him though. So I did not know that he ever got those forms or not. But those forms were sent. And I kept Fred, I think, in the loop too, in several of my emails that I wrote to Jim, just so that more than one person would have it. And that same thing with the landscaping plan. A complete landscaping plan is there. They just haven't voted on it because they haven't met since. That's basically my defense. Other than that, I've completed, everything. So, yes.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question real quick?
Go ahead.
Farouk, I just want to clarify, when you say you sent in the Form L, did you do that via the postal service where it could be in a mailbox at the town hall, or did you do it via email?
I did it through email.
Okay.
I printed off your site, filled them out, and I sent it. I know it has a place for it to be signed by the notary, but I didn't know how that would work out with us in remote places. So.
Okay, we might need to get
resubmit it. It's no big deal. So.
Mr. Chair, if I can just comment on the notary part of this whole thing.
Sure.
Destiny Ashworth has a notary, so if the forms have to be notarized, as long as we know what's being done, Destiny can do that on a Tuesday or Thursday. If Mr. Ansari can stop by the office, he can call and make arrangements if we have to have it notarized for him.
So Jim Robbins, can you address that? I thought you had said that the notary needs to witness.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Destiny's been very gracious to notarize forms for us. She's done it in the past. The governor and the state attorney general's order requires that the notary witness the board voting, and then she can notarize it later. She doesn't have to be at the meeting. So that would mean Destiny would have to be on this Zoom call. I did not ask her to be on this call because I didn't have the forms. Now, Farouk, if you claim you sent them electronically, perhaps they went to my junk mail, but neither Kristen or I received them. So even if we had received them though, you're not in a position to be up to date because you're not in compliance with your special permit. Design review has to happen. That's a requirement of your special permit. It has to happen. I know you don't like it, but just submitting the forms is not enough. You have to get the approval.
Okay, so I think we've been around on this quite a bit, and I just don't see what we have to vote on. We don't have lot release forms. Jim, procedurally, do you need us to vote on anything, or Jim Robbins?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, you don't have anything to vote on. I don't think you need to vote. I think you should wait until Mr. Ansari gets the approvals from the design review board.
So again, I think at this point, Farouk, everybody's had a chance to weigh in. I see Tim Paris is on the call. Tim, I'm not sure how long you've been on. I didn't notice when you checked in. Did you have any questions on the project that you wanted addressed? Tim, you have to unmute yourself.
No, I don't have any.
All right, thanks. All right, So, Farouk, I think at this point, we'll put you on the agenda for the next meeting on June 2nd. And we will be hopeful that there'll be more progress towards, what you're hoping to achieve, which is the lot releases.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to keep interrupting. I need one more piece of clarification, if I may.
Okay, good. What was that?
With the clubhouse, the board there's a building permit in for that now. The initial plan review was for a build out. If the board is going to allow the shell only, it's a completely different review from a building code standpoint. So I have to get some clarification to whether the board will allow the shell only for the commercial, or if it's going to be a build out, because I can't do anything with the permit until that decision's been made.
Okay, yeah, I would like that, the board to address that. Who wants to start on as far as a commercial building and whether that can be a shell only, or whether that needs to be completed? Jim Ball, I see you unmuted, so go ahead.
I think if the shell is, I understand there isn't an existing tenant, it is hard to do complete design, but I would want to see the shell up, a complete, fully, enclosed, weather-tight shell, which is, I think to Jim Robbins' point, these buildings have to be built for this project to go forward. Certainly there won't be any later occupancy permits without that done. We can't have this happen again. And so as long as the shell is such and and clearly design review approves it, because I don't think they approve interiors anyway. And then with the understanding that if there's a particular use, to Fred's point, where zoning requires some adjustments to entries or exits and things, you'd have to accept that you may have to make those changes after the fact. The shell would be satisfactory to me. That shows a commitment to constructing it. Jim, can you clarify for me, Jim Robbins, for occupancy, must that building be occupied for those last occupancy buildings or just constructed?
So the decision is silent on occupancy for the commercial.
Okay.
It says constructed.
All right, can we hear from the rest of the board on the commercial building? Hazel, are you ready to address that? Hazel, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. I guess my concern is that I would feel more comfortable if I had some idea about usage on it, because that really will affect the design from design review. So, it's kind of hard for design review to approve a shell when there may have to be changes later. So I think this is something I'll discuss with design review and see what they have to say. So I'm not really willing to make a firm decision in the moment.
Bill, that's it.
Thanks. In terms of the commercial space, I just want to rely on the intent when that was put forward. And the intent was to, I thought, have substantial construction underway. But I think I will rely with Hazel and her group to see what their opinion is on that. If we start the shell, and then Fred's obviously going to have to probably address it a different way in terms of building. So it's just another one of these open spaces with this project that it just causes me a little bit concerned. Just hate to see that shell go up and then it sits and we don't do anything with it as we move forward. So with that in mind, I really don't have anything substantially more to say about where we're at this point on that.
Tim Paris, do you have any comments?
I think I'd be fine with the shell, with the understanding that if a tenant finally does come and there are any changes that have to happen to the outside, it would be required to go back to design review at that point. But if it stays up as an empty shell throughout the construction of everything else, I don't see that as a problem.
So I guess I would just like to clarify in my mind what the difference is. When you say a shell, Fred, the building across from CVS that just went up, is that built out, or is that just a shell at the present time? I'm just trying to envision in my head what a shell looks like. From the outside, it would look completed.
So the answer to that, Mr. Chair, is that they did that in phases. There was an intent to finish the inside as an office. So they did a quote unquote shell permit only for the exterior and the basic roof and the windows, blah, blah, blah. So it was weather tight. They now have an additional permit to finish a portion of the inside to completion. And then they're going to do a vanilla box in part of it. So they would technically, assuming they get all the fire alarm and some other things in place, they could occupy part of the building, and the other part, they haven't completely finalized the design on it. So what happens with a shell only permit basically is you just do the outside components. There's no inside finishes. So from a review standpoint, it's not a habitable building. It may not have fire. If it in this case, it may not need fire suppression sprinklers, but it might need some kind of fire alarms. It would need exit signs, lighting, heating. So those type of buildings on a shell only wouldn't have any of that. So that's why the review is different. So very succinctly, the building you're talking about was done in those stages. It was given a shell permit only. They did the shell, and then they subsequently followed up with fit up permits. And that's where they're at now. So you wouldn't know that until you went in the building.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone else that wants to comment on this? Because well, let me just say that I think I agree with Tim's point, and I think Jim may have made the same point that I'd be okay with a shell only permit with the idea that any changes to the building need to come back to design review. Hazel, you had your hand raised. Did you have that or something else?
Yeah, I had a question for Fred. Fred, when you talk about a shell permit, does this mean, for example, if the building were going to be clapboard all the way around, the windows finished from the outside, is that what we're talking about as far as a shell permit goes?
Well, so to answer your question is that they would have to have some kind of finished material on the outside, whatever the material would be, vinyl or wood or shakes or whatever the DRB chooses for a material to finish it on the outside. And the only thing I want to be clear of here is that if we, and it sounds like you might be leaning towards allowing the shell only, I would suggest to the planning board they consider what happens long-term as far as the 5,400 total square feet. They has to do 3,000 and 2,400, and he has an option to go up to 9,000. At some point before this project is let go, if you don't go past the shell permit only, that basic building will sit there with nothing that's inside. It can't be occupied as a shell only permit. So I think the board should just consider at some point, not necessarily today or in the near future so he can do the shell, but at some point you'd want to put a caveat in there that commercial space has to be finished. If it doesn't get finished, it basically sits there as a blank vanilla box for eternity.
Okay. Farouk, go ahead.
Okay. I just want you people to realize I am not in the business of building shells and leaving them empty. I'm trying to appease the board and myself, getting the shell up way before what the other guy did next door, the Toll Brothers. You'd be shocked. Give me the permit, the shell will be up in a month, okay? But it's not going to be left as a shell. I want to have a daycare center in it that I am trying to find somebody to run. Until I find somebody to run and then all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, I don't want to commit to it. In the meantime, I want to get the building up. So I'm not going to get the building up and let it remain empty and pay interest on it. That's like $3,000, $4,000 a month I would have to shell out just to support an empty building. It makes absolutely no sense. I've got attorneys calling me. I've got dentist office calling me, but I'm not ready. The right thing to do is what we are doing. You always build a shell and then you find a tenant and you modify it. Now, if that modification involves the outside of it, you go back to the design review board again, just like Tim mentioned. So that's just the nature of the beast. So according to the space up, I will get it done even before the 7th unit gets built and occupied. That I'm on that, you know, if you allow me, by releasing some of these things, I'll get it up and finish it too inside.
Okay, Jim Robbins, if we allow the shell permit and the building then is not finished inside, what authority does the board have as far as either the bond or some other authority to ensure that that building is finished?
So you don't have a bond.
It's really hard for us to envision how to finish that. So
You do not currently have a bond on the commercial space. The bond that you have for this development is to secure the common area and the utilities and the access. So the driveway, the parking lot, the lighting, the landscaping, those kinds of things is what you have the bond for. You don't have a bond for the private commercial space. And you might consider that, or you might consider the way that you release the lots. For example, he has to build the 3,000 and he can have up to the last lot release. Then he has to build another 2,400 and he can have his last lot release. You might reconsider the way that you release the lots to discuss some way to get occupancy of that space. I haven't given that a lot of thought, other than that you might have to vote to amend the permit based on the way you release the lots. If you're worried that that's going to sit forever as a shell, then you're going to have to put some value to the building, and that's either in the form of a bond or the number of lots you release.
all right,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may for a second.
Fred, go ahead.
Your other option, I'm sure Mr. Robbins would have thought about this, given a little thought, albeit it goes back to me. You can tie it to a C of O too, whether it be the 14th C of O, the 15th C of O. You can tie it to a specific C of O that either part or all the commercial building has to be built out by a particular C of O.
All right, so I would say that, Fred, you're looking for guidance on the shell permit tonight, or can we put that guidance off until the 2nd as well?
Well, it's up to Mr. Ansari and the board, because I can't go forward with either the clubhouse or the commercial building until I'm given some guidance by the board. I'm kind of in limbo because I can't tell the other inspectors how to review it until we know if we're going to just do a shell or if we're going to do a fit out. I need guidance. That's all I can say.
Well, I've heard Mr. Ansari say that he'll work with design review on the design of the building and the clubhouse, and he'll put plumbing into the clubhouse, which I believe is, we can take a vote on this, but I believe that the board's sentiments would want bathrooms and air and heat in the clubhouse. I think that we can probably address those in 2 separate votes as far as the shell. To be honest, I'd like you and Jim to come back to us on the 2nd. Brad, I'm sorry, and Jim, to come back to us on the 2nd with a mechanism where we can ensure that that building is completed beyond the shell, whether it be occupancy or holding back one lot release, or I think it will probably be occupancy. I think that's the best suggestion. So I guess we can give you some guidance tonight for a vote. I'm just not sure exactly what we're voting on.
Through the chairman, can I say something?
Farouk, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry to keep butting in. There is a design review board meeting in 2 days, day after tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to discuss this building. All I ask is if they're okay with the shell, at least give me the foundation permit so I can, I mean, I don't want to just stay there, you know, I want to get, right now we are rolling over there. So I want to get the foundation in and start the shell. You are concerned that I won't have that filled by the time the last unit gets the occupancy? No problem. I'll voluntarily, you don't need to make amendments in your decisions or anything like that. I'll voluntarily say that's going to be occupied. Okay.
Has the design review board discussed the commercial building in one of their meetings yet? Or Hazel, can you answer that question? I'm sorry.
No, we have seen nothing on it whatsoever.
I don't know how you can expect us to release a lot for the commercial building when it hasn't been approved by design review. I don't see that as a feasible option.
I think,
Go ahead.
let me just quickly say, I think my concern, and I would think the concern of the design review board would be, they need to know what the possible uses are of the building. I mean, if he's going to make a daycare versus a commercial building, it could be quite different, because for a daycare, you're going to need more exits, I assume, you know, to get to a playground. Is there going to be a playground then attached to it? I mean, there's a huge difference in the way this building would be constructed, I would think, as compared to a daycare versus a doctor's office. So that's my concern at this point, is that if we have no idea what the use is, I mean, I do think a daycare would be a wonderful use, but am I not right, Fred, that the access, there'd be significant changes. There'd have to be significant changes in the exterior of the building in order to accommodate a daycare center versus an office building.
Yeah, Jim Ball, I saw your hands raised, so I'll let you comment first. And then
I just want to make the comment that people will often build a spec building without a tenant in hand yet, and we are requiring Farouk to get this building up to continue to make progress. So I think that there is a certain design that can be done that would be eligible for multiple uses. I think your point's excellent, Hazel. I think that you've got to see a building that fits in with the design of the rest of this. And if indeed a use comes up that requires from the building code changes to entrance or exits or such, we've said Farouk will have to come back to you for those changes, similar to what's happening now. Unfortunately, Farouk, having not abided by what they asked you to do previously, has got you somewhat in this spot with us on these other units. And so, you know, you'd have to agree. And so I just want to say, being an investor in real estate, you don't always have a tenant in hand before you build a building. And in this case, we're requiring this for the rest of the project to go forward. I'd want to allow approval with the design that you approve, Hazel, but that if the use then doesn't fit that design and some things have to be changed, you'd have to get further approval from you. So that's just my thoughts there.
All right, so I think we've spent an hour on this, close to an hour, and I feel like we're at a point where we can give the building commissioner some guidance. I think we need to take a vote on whether to allow a shell permit, assuming a vote is appropriate in this circumstance. I feel like I'm not sure how to make a motion on this. We don't have, if somebody wants to endeavor a motion on the shell permit, I'm just thinking about how to phrase that. And then we should also make a motion on the clubhouse as to whether that needs to be a year-round building with bathroom facilities. I think those are two separate votes, and that would be the guidance that Fred is looking for tonight. Then we can come back again on the 2nd, and hopefully design review will have a successful meeting. I'm sure they'll do everything in their power to work with the developer to make sure that he gets some progress before our next meeting, and we'll get the proper paperwork and the notary available, and hopefully make some more progress towards those lot releases at the next meeting. So I guess,
I can make an attempt, Mark.
all right, Jim, I'll let you try to motion one of those issues.
I would move that we vote to approve Fred allowing a shell permit for the commercial once it is approved in its initial proposed design by design review, with the clear understanding that if an ultimate tenant requires exterior changes, that it will further require subsequent approval from design review.
Okay. I will second that motion. Any discussion of that motion from the board?
Should we include something about it being finished before the last certificate of occupancy?
Well,
Do you want that in this same motion, or that would be later, wouldn't it?
yeah, I think I had asked Fred and Jim to come up with something by the next meeting, whether it be related to lot releases or occupancy permits, that we would have a mechanism to ensure that that building be finished. So I don't think I would include that language at this time, but does anyone else have a feeling on that since we're discussing that motion? Jim Robbins, what are you thinking? How is the language of that motion for you?
Oh, that sounds fine. That sounds like that addresses Fred's concern. And Fred and I can discuss this offline about how we might tie this to either occupancies or lot releases for its completion, that is. But again, keep in mind that right now, he has to build another 2,400 square feet before he can get the last lot.
I know, I'm aware of it.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call on it then. Bill?
Excuse me, Mark, who was the second?
I seconded it.
Okay.
Bill, Spencer, how do you vote on that?
We'll go with that, yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Hazel?
I'm going to vote against that.
Jim?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to vote yes as well.
Thank you.
All right, we need a motion on the clubhouse. Has anyone thought about language for that motion? I'm going to make a motion that the clubhouse design be approved by design review board, or be reviewed by design review board, and altered to include heating and bathrooms for year-round use.
And air conditioning.
And air conditioning, thank you.
I'll second that, Mark.
All right. Any discussion of that? Am I forgetting anything in that motion? Fred, do you think of anything that I might have forgotten, or Jim Robbins? I see shaking heads no.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I think we can handle that from a building code standpoint as long as you get that basic in there.
Okay. Baruch, I had heard you earlier agree to those conditions on that, so I'll give you a chance.
I'm very fine with it.
No, we have a motion and a second, so it's really up to the board to discuss it at this point. I think any other discussion from the board members? Any comments? Okay, I'll take a roll call again. Bill?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Hazel?
That improvement.
Okay. That was a yes, Hazel, right?
Yeah, that was a yes.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little on my, okay.
Yeah,
Jim Ball? Okay, Jim Ball?
Yes, Mark.
Okay, and I'll vote yes on that motion as well. All right, Brooke, I think at this point, we'll see you again in 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll have made some progress towards the lot releases. Okay.
One last question. So the planning board has nothing to do with where the mailboxes go? Just a DRB? Jim?
Well, I think that's a design review issue, yes.
Well, it is the planning board, but I think the design review board could weigh in on it. Farouk, let's bring that to the design review board on Thursday morning.
Okay. I'll send you those forms in the meantime.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
please resend it because neither Kristen or I received it. Send it again and ask for confirmation.
I'll send it to you tonight. Please respond that you got it. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, I think that is all I have on the agenda. We had a A&R plan for 30 Belknap. That's going to be moved to the next meeting. The Master Advisory Committee is rescheduled to, I'm sorry, was it, what's the date on the?
June 2nd.
June 2nd, so it's after our next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. We have minutes from May 5th. Is everybody?
Actually, I do not have those ready for approval yet.
Okay. Do we have any minutes, Bill or Kristen?
No, I have to finish those and send those out.
Okay. All right. Is there any other old or new business that we need to go through, Jim Robbins?
No, you noted that the A&R plan is not ready for 30 Belknap. That has been promised to us by June 2nd.
Right. And we all know that town meeting is not Thursday, right?
Yes, town meeting is now the 30th of June.
So we'll all see you as the 30th or the 20th. It's the 30th. You're right. Okay. Any other items for the agenda that I'm missing, Jim?
No.
Okay. I will make a motion to adjourn.
I can second that.
Okay, any discussion? I'll do a roll call again. All those in favor, Bill Spencer?
Aye.
Aye.
Hazel says aye.
Yes.
Tim Paris, Jim Ball says
Hello.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you all very much. Jason, I think I said earlier, please pass along my thank yous to the fire department for everything you guys have done.
Yes,
In these times.
all the time.
And really to the entire, all the town board and town departments have been, really exceptional, I think. So thank you guys.
Your town engineer appears to be on the call too, although I don't see Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, for the memo on the writings too, and thank you for being here.
We can't hear your response, Lisa.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Have a great night, everyone, and stay safe.
Good night.